Hi, everyone. Welcome to Global Leadership Platform. I'm Adrian Groenewald, and it's such a privilege to be with you. We're heading into another round of authentic leadership conversations all over the globe, and I'm hoping to hit every single continent like I did last year. This is also part of our Hash 2020 DAL. It stands for Decade of Authentic Leadership Initiative or Vision. And what is this really? It is an authentic leadership revolution in order to expedite the emergence of authentic leaders so that we can somehow eradicate or turn the tide on weak, toxic, and incompetent leaders or leadership out there. We must do something differently. We've got to somehow mobilize the experts and the influencers all over the world so that we can, turn it in the next decade. If we don't, who knows where the planet will go? Who knows where organizations will go, and even families for that matter. So I'm starting to interview experts, authors, coaches, facilitators, the influencers, the people who actually develop leaders all over the world. I'm going to interview them, and I'm starting today with my special guest all the way from Edinburgh, all the way from Scotland in the UK, Agnesia Agrella. She's a global business architect and change facilitator. So Agnesia, welcome to Global Leadership Platform.
Thank you so much, Adrian, and thanks for the invite. I really am privileged to be here with you today.
Yeah, no, it's our privilege to have you with us. So yes, I'm pretty much going to pop the same 5 questions to our experts on all the continents of the planet, and we'll adapt it as we go along. The first question is to make sure we're on the same page, or that you can communicate to us how you would describe an authentic leader or authentic leadership. I'm more interested in an authentic leader, to be honest. Describe that person for us so that we can taste and feel and sense it from where you sit.
I think an authentic leader really has to work and overcome the emotions within them. They have to be able to tap into their internal environment, understand what that is about, what triggers them in their external environment, and how can they interact with their external environment without being triggered and reacting. That they've got the ability to stop and think how they want to react once they've been triggered with their external environment. So it's somebody who really understands the insides, how they work from the inside rather than from the outside. Okay,
and that takes incredible maturity, I guess a conscious effort to know myself inside out. And then you're saying to be in control of me before I react or overreact towards my external environment. I guess one can talk about that for a while, but that's a simple way. I mean, would you say that that is the type of leader we need desperately in our global leadership crisis, or the gap that we find ourselves in, potentially?
I think so, yes. Because we are all sort of the same as animals. You know, when we are in a situation where we feel threatened or we don't know how to react, we have got a vulnerable side as well. And so at the moment, we've got a lot of uncertainty in the world. And that is from all sorts of different perspectives: political, economical, and environmental. There's a lot of uncertainty. And as humans, we don't react very well with uncertainty because it makes us vulnerable. And if we're vulnerable, we go into that defensive state, which brings our fight, flight, or freeze into ourselves. And that is what we need to understand. We need to understand, what is our defense? Is it going to be a fight, a flight, or a freeze? And we need to then understand, how do we want to react to the environment? And that does take a lot of work. It does take conscious effort to understand yourself. But at a lower level, it is possible for anybody to do that. Change is not easy, but it's possible.
Okay, so one of the things you mentioned that stand out for me is we need those kind of authentic leaders, mature leaders, because of the incredible uncertainty we find ourselves in. And we don't need overreaction. We need calmness. We need confident leaders, the kind of leaders you described. Now, the big question is, for me, is how large is the global leadership gap between what you just said and what we're actually finding out there, collectively speaking? No doubt you come across leaders that are like this or close to this, but how big would you say, or just describe the gap between that and the reality?
I think there's still too much. There's a huge gap. And the big gap for that is because people still think when we start talking about this language that it's spiritual and that it is the airy-fairy part of who we are as human beings. This is biological. It is physical, and it's now proven through neuroscience how our bodies work. So that belief system is still very prevalent in a lot of leaders where they don't want to go to that side because they're seen as the esoteric side. But it's very physical. We have to understand our bodies are driven by hormones much quicker than our belief systems. Before we knew it, we've reacted. So to actually understand what happens in your body, you have to become familiar with what is the sensations in your body. Where do you feel it? Where does it sit? What does it feel like when that fear comes up? Doesn't matter who you are, as a human being, whether you a prime minister or a CEO of a large organization, we all have fears and we all don't have all the answers to all the questions. But we have to find a way of how can we work with the people around us to know how we're going to face this uncertainty. And authentic leaders are comfortable with that uncertainty because they know they don't know, and they know what they don't know, but they know where to go and who to put around them to get that certainty. And it's that creative process when we actually step into the unknown and we start creating from each other's power and our own brain power, when we come up with solutions that one or two people can't think about. When you get into that creativity of the human resource, the sky's the limit. And authentic leaders know how to tap into that creativity of the people around them. They empower people around them. They don't put them down. They don't tell them what they can't do. They actually build them up. They give them confidence to actually go into that uncertain times.
As you were speaking, a thought popped into my mind, and then I shifted it aside to listen. But it was that they know that others know that they don't know, and that it's okay. It's you know what I mean. There's still this together. I want to match with that belief system that you think are stopping them from becoming these kind of leaders. That belief system goes hand in hand with the belief that I've got to come across as knowing everything, as being in control, and I'm it. I'm the one that the one that everyone must come to for all the answers. Okay, I'm interested. I love what you're sharing with us. What are you doing as a leader, and probably within your business, to help us drive this authentic leadership revolution? What are you doing to help turn that tide? Well, more the positive statement, to help with the emergence of authentic leaders faster than ever before. We need to do something differently and better, and to close that gap. You're obviously in this space. What are you doing? Explain to us.
Well, I've worked with that. I've been lucky enough as well to actually work with that creative process in all the projects that I've ever worked in and all the organizations that I've worked in. So I know how motivational it is when you get into that space with a group of people where you actually create. So I really like to take people and show them that they can do it. So it really needs facilitation. It is really building them up and showing them, build their confidence, creating a space where it's okay. If we make a mistake, we're going to learn from that mistake. But it's really getting people hooked onto that creative thought. And what I'm doing now is I'm working with a scientist, Dr. Joe Dispenza, who's a neuroscientist, who's done a lot of research around what does it mean to change. But what he's also done is he's measured for 6 years what happens in our brain and our hearts and our energy centers when we apply certain techniques. And that information is now becoming available from a scientific perspective. There's a lot of scientists who are taking action and is really interested in his work because of the shifts that's happening within people. So the scientific methodologies is now starting to explain what happens in our bodies. It becomes a lot easier for people to understand, but this is physical. It's things that we can't see, but we can all feel it. So we train organizations on how to be aware of what happens in their body, how to become creative, and how to be comfortable being in that space. So we do trainings all around the world, and that is what I do. I'm one of those trainers. I'm also a business architects, so I do operating models for organizations, because when your people get so creative, you need to adjust your processes, your procedures, and your reward systems to make sure that you're rewarding the behavior you want them to do. We think 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day, and 90% of those are the same as the day before. And unless you actually reward them to do something in the future that you want them to do, they're going to do what they did yesterday. And that's what we do, is we take them away from yesterday and we put them in the future.
I guess if you don't do that architecturing afterwards, then all the investment and all the work and training and coaching might just disappear. If you don't practice structures with that, yeah.
Within 3 to 6 months, they will revert back to what they do. We don't do it for them, we do it with them. So we show and coach them how to do it, and then we stay with them at least, depending on how big the team is, 3 to 6 months to help them to understand what they need to do to take it forward in the organization.
Okay, so Agnesia, let's move from interesting conversation to an interesting principle or exercise or something. I want you to go into trainer mode, almost facilitator mode, and share the essence of a principle, or via an exercise, doesn't matter, that leaders out there can implement or work on or incorporate into their lives in order to be a better, authentic leader. Leave us with something that is empowering in that regard.
You have to actually still your mind at some stage every day. And you actually have to take the time, and I believe it should be in the mornings, when you get up, or in the evenings just before you go to bed. You have to take some time to still your mind and to create the future you want. So you must be able to think about, how is my day going to be today, and how am I seeing it happen? And then you have to feel it, you have to see it, and you have to actually be with it on the inside. So that is internally. So that will give you the space where you take some time for yourself to listen. How often can your mind go in what tangent? How often does it go into the negative? How often does it go into the positive? Our brains are not wired to be positive, because it's wired to make us safe, to protect us. And that means it will always see the worst case scenario. You have to train your brain like any other muscle to be positive, to create the future you want. And that is why change is so difficult, because people are not prepared to take the time to exercise their brain muscle. They want it done for them. They want an instant tablet or a pill that's going to make them easier and make it easier for them. Unfortunately, with this work, you have to do the work. You have to still your mind. You have to practice your mind and put it into the future. What do you want to create? And then you have to focus on that for most of the day. And if you do veer off, you will acknowledge it, but you always have to come back to say, how can I make a difference? How can I put positive energy? How can I find a solution instead of the negative side of the situation?
Okay, so let me say, you're saying still your mind and create the future you want. And that is definitely not something we grow up with. We definitely are not taught necessarily how to, first thing in the morning, make sense. Go and sit somewhere quiet. If you have that sort of advantage of your own study or room or balcony or garden, and make your mind still, and then consciously think about your day. I guess that's what we call meditate, prayer. We have lots of words for that, don't we? Or are you something a little bit different?
I like to use mental rehearsal because it's different. You're not just stilling your mind. You're not just asking for somebody to do something on your behalf. This is, how am I going to create my day? You have to visualize and rehearse what that outcome is going to be. So you have to create your future as if it's happened now, in that moment. So it is a rehearsal of what you want.
Okay. Yeah, that would take some exercise and focus and discipline and I guess clarity about what you want, clarity about who you are, all of that.
Well, that's the point, because so many of us don't know what we want. We focus on what we don't want, and then we wonder why it shows up.
All right, now let's go from that personal, internal tip that you've given us, thank you so much, to what else can we do on a global scale, on a more macro scale, to expedite the emergence of authentic leaders during the 2020 decade, would you say?
Well, I think it starts with each one of us, because we all add to the collective of the consciousness in the world. And we cannot look at who is going to do it on our behalf. It starts with me, it starts with you, it starts with anybody around the world. We are all leaders. I also think that in the next century, it's not going to be about who's going to lead us there. We are going to lead from the collective. As a group, in a business, in an organization, in a family, we all have to decide how are we as individuals going to contribute to the whole. And from that perspective, we have to take responsibility for our own thoughts and our own actions of, am I prepared to do that work? Not, are you prepared to do the work? Start with me. I am the change. I have to be the change I want to see in the world. And you go to any big leader who we can go and study. That is what they all have done. And it's once they've done that, when they've come back to lead a group of people, countries, the world, to actually then be big leaders. It starts with, what am I prepared to do?
Agnesia, Agrella, all the way from the UK or from Scotland, Edinburgh, thank you so much for sharing some brief wisdom with us. Thank you for the role you're playing in turning around that tide of weak, toxic, and incompetent leadership, in helping us expedite the emergence of authentic leaders in the next decade, and hence our vision, #2020 DAL, Decade of Authentic Leadership. We really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Adrian, and I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.